at 16, the one thing that would have changed me at 16 while I was living in a car in Alaska, well, I tell you, the number one thing would have been a stable family life, which I didn't have at that time. I was living in a car, alone, parked at a lake about a half mile where I went to high school, about a half mile from where I went to high school, that is. And what it does to you, I can tell you this, what it does to you is, the first thing right at the bat is, as a kid, and this can carry on for decades, even until the day you die, is the instability, the insecurity. When you're on your own at that age, maybe even younger, who knows? It's a lonely feeling, you know, at the bottom. You know, people say it's lonely at the top. Well, it's lonely at the bottom too. You know, it certainly is. And I was alone at 16, living in my car. And I can tell you that insecurity stayed with me for some time. I mean, I never felt secure, no matter what situation I was in. I lived with a lot of families when I was in high school in Alaska, in the small town of Wasilla, which is about an hour from Anchorage, if you know the area. If you don't, check it out on a map. It's a small little town. I was just there last year, took my sons there last year. I went to my old school and we did some fishing and camping and stuff like that. I hadn't been there for decades, so it brought back a lot of memories, you know. Took them to the lake where I used to park my car in 1984, 85, 86, during those years. Somewhere in there. There were a lot of years I was spending for myself, as was my older brother. But what I recognized that I didn't have immediately was support, the love of a family, because at the end of the day, living in that car, you feel pretty unloved, pretty abandoned, so to speak. You know you have a mom, you know you have a dad. My mom was in Arizona, my dad was in the town of Wasilla with his wife, and you know, that he had been married to for some time. My parents divorced when I was very young, they remarried. I had been living with my dad before I ended up in the car, but things didn't work out with him and his wife and all that. So my brother and I, my older brother and I, we ended up on our own. He was living with friends or somebody else, and I ended up in a car. But immediately it was the instability of it. That's what really struck me. I had no family support, no structure there in place. So where do you turn? You turn to yourself. You turn to anybody or anything that you can get your hands on that will provide some semblance of stability. Now, I had a few friends. I had one good friend that would bring me food by his parents owned a restaurant there in the town of Wasilla. They owned a small, like, family restaurant, and he would bring me by food, you know, and stuff like that. He was a very good friend. I just spoke to him a few days ago, actually. We're still in contact. But he was a very good friend. You learn to really appreciate those kind of friends when you're down on your luck, especially when you're young like that and you just have no family support, no structure. So yeah, he would come by. It's getting windy out here. He would come by and bring me food. I'm gonna hold my camera stick here. But he was a bridge. He stepped in. And there were a lot of people that stepped in. The number one person that stepped in was my friend Todd. And again, he brought me food. He was there to he would come by and check on me and things like that. Wherever I was usually parked at the lake. Like I said, about a half mile from the high school. And there was a McDonald's that had just come in, and it was right across the street from the lake, and we would go over there and get an apple pie and a chocolate shake. He would buy this for me. I didn't have money. I later got a job and got I had money coming in. I was able to put gas in the car and buy food and things like that. Blankets, which I didn't have. So my best friend Todd would come by and help me out. He was a very caring young man, now an old guy now, you know, we joke about that. But you recognize right away what you don't have when you're in a situation like that, living in a car in Alaska, especially in a place like that where you can die out there if you don't have, you know, warmth, shelter, food, clothing, those sorts of things, the basic necessities. And I didn't have those things. So that's the one thing. The one thing that would have changed everything, obviously, my situation was to have that stable family. Well, I didn't have it, so I had to rely on people like Todd and other people. It was very important that he was there for me. He was there for me. He stepped in and really, to a large extent, saved me. But I also know that, you know, God's hand was in all of it, because, you know, every time I was in a really bad spot or a pinch, a rough spot, you know, not only Todd would step in, but others, you know, would come along. You realize when you look back at that situation, how kind and loving people were, because had they not been there for me, who knows where I would have ended up. You know, that's the thing. Who knows? Probably wouldn't be sitting here talking about this right now, 40 years later. Probably wouldn't be. So that really meant a lot to me. At the time, I was thankful, but I'm so much more thankful now, decades later, that people were there to help me when I truly needed it. Whether it was with food, maybe a couple of bucks to get me through the day, maybe a couple of bucks for the car to get the, you know, gas to get where I needed to go, like a job that I later got, which really helped a lot. That was a big deal. That was a big deal, because then I had money. I could at least buy food. I could at least, you know, I could at least survive. And I was in survival mode at that time. But at the end of the day, my whole life would have changed if I'd have had family stability. And that's really what came once I went through all those initial emotions of being in the car, realizing that, you know, the one thing that could have changed my life instantly was to have family structure, family stability. And that's one thing I knew I always wanted to have if I had ever had a family of my own, which I do and have for many years now. I'm blessed to have them. I'm thankful. And I'm thankful to friends like Todd and so many others that helped me along the way. So there's a lot more to tell about this. If you haven't seen my other video on living in a car in Alaska at the age of 16 in 1985, you can check it out up here. I'll post that up there. I really appreciate you watching. I really love you guys. Whoever tunes in, I'm just so appreciative. And I hope you get a little something out of it. I hope you know that you can make it through tough times like that. I'm living proof of that, because I'm here to tell about it 40 years later. God bless. Thank you so much again. I'll see you real soon.